You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, session hijacking, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, session cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific exposed data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation that fits seamlessly into existing incident response frameworks. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show.
The U.S. Government Accountability Office, or GAO, was established over 100 years ago. We've spoken about it a few times of late. Its main purpose when it was established was to check the legality and adequacy of government expenditures. In 2004, GAO's legal name changed from the General Accounting Office to the Government Accountability Office. The change reflects the agency's expanding role in a growing federal government. Moving beyond financial audits, GAO began conducting performance audits, examining how government programs were performing and whether they were meeting their objectives. NASA has come under scrutiny of the GAO of late, and now it's the Federal Aviation Administration's turn.
T-minus 20 seconds to LOS speed rest. Go for deploy.
Today is December the 11th, 2023. I'm Alice Carruth, and this is T-minus. GAO report finds FAA mishap investigation process wanting. SDA says current budget indecisions have put projects on hold. Egypt signs on to China's International Lunar Research Station. And our guest today is Anastasia Prosina, CEO at Stellar Amenities. Stay with us for Maria's chat with her at the second half of the show. Now on to today's intelligence briefing. Mishaps are a regular occurrence in space operations. I've personally seen hundreds of small launches in my previous roles, and I've guesstimated about 10% end up in a CATO. That's a catastrophe after takeoff. CATOs, along with other mishaps, which can include anything from engine malfunctions, fuel system problems, management and procedural problems, manufacturing defects, and vehicle control, often trigger an investigation. Of course, by the launch team to understand what went wrong, and also from the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA. Although the FAA can investigate a mishap itself, it's been found that it's always opted to authorize the launch operator to investigate under agency supervision. Now, the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, is looking into this process and found that the FAA doesn't have criteria to determine when to authorize an operator to investigate its own mishap, nor has it evaluated how effective its investigation process is. According to the GAO report, the FAA has taken some steps to improve mishap investigations, such as contracting for independent reviews of some operator-led investigations. However, the report found that the FAA has not evaluated the effectiveness of its operator-reliant process. Most stakeholders told the GAO that they support the FAA's investigation process, but some have expressed concerns whether operators can credibly investigate their own mishaps. The GAO concluded that without a comprehensive evaluation of its mishap investigation process, the FAA cannot be assured that its process is effective, especially given the expansion of the commercial space operations in recent years. And yes, that flight cadence is going up, and with it, so are mishap occurrences. FAA data shows that 50 commercial space launches from 2000 through to mid-January of this year resulted in mishaps. This represents about 12% of the 433 launches during the same period. Thankfully, none of these resulted in serious injury or death, which would also include other agencies. The GAO is making 2 recommendations to the FAA. Number 1, develop criteria for determining when the agency will authorize a launch operator lead a mishap investigation on the agency's behalf. And number 2, comprehensively evaluate the effectiveness of its mishap investigation process. Remarkably, the FAA has agreed with the GAO recommendations. We will see how this affects current mishap investigations, such as SpaceX's Starship mishap from last month. The Space Development Agency is the latest to acknowledge that the current budget standoff in the US is having an immediate impact on their work. SDA Director Tarek Tournier said last week that the agency has already put some projects on hold due to the ongoing continuing resolution, which pauses spending at fiscal 2023 levels. Tournier said during a National Security Space Association webinar that, quote, "The biggest thing that we could ask is for predictability on the budget, passing the budget so that we can continue to move fast. Right now, we can move as fast as we can, but uncertainty in funding will put a brake on everything, so it's a big problem." The continuing resolution expires on February 2nd, 2024, but should not have impact on the agency's Tranche 1 launches. And we've included a link to further reading on the Space Development Agency's warfighter tranche layers in our show notes. The Combined Space Operations Initiative Principles Board, known as CISPO, met in Berlin last week to address space security. The annual event brought together DoD political and military space leadership from the US, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, New Zealand, and my native United Kingdom, and also welcomed 3 new members, Italy, Japan, and Norway. The 10 members of CISPO discussed opportunities to further advance both operational cooperation and information sharing for the space domain. According to a US DoD press release, representatives emphasized the need to continue to promote a rules-based international order and responsible behavior in space, while collaboratively addressing challenges to the safety and security of space-related operations. Space Force General Chance Saltzman said of the meeting that this coalition of like-minded nations enhances our ability to address the complex challenges we collectively face in space. The US Space Force has activated its newest service component to be headquartered in Germany. Ramstein Air Base will be home to the US Space Force's Europe and Africa, known as Space 4U/AF, under the command of Space Force Colonel Max Lantz. Lantz previously managed the US military space capabilities in Europe and Africa as part of the Air Component, US Air Forces in Europe, Air Forces Africa. Space 4U/AF is now the 4th service component embedded into one of the US military's regional commands, joining US Central Command, US Indo-Pacific Command, and US Forces Korea. Egypt is the latest country to sign on with China for their planned International Lunar Research Station. The heads of China's National Space Administration and the Egyptian Space Agency signed the cooperation agreement to work together on the lunar station, which is expected to be up and running by 2035. According to the Chinese Space Agency's website, the 2 countries will work together on the lunar station's design, related space missions, the development of space systems, subsystems, facilities, and ground-based segments, as well as talent training and capacity building. And staying with China, the commercial reusable rocket, known as the Hybola-2Y, held its 2nd successful test flight this weekend. The spacecraft has been developed by Beijing's Interstellar Glory Space Technology Limited, known as iSpace. It reached an apogee of less than a quarter of a mile and then returned back to Earth. The next version of the rocket is expected to have its first full test flight in 2025. NASA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the National Space Foundation, and the US Air Force have signed a memorandum of agreement for space weather research to operations to research collaboration. This Quad agency agreement outlines the responsibilities for collaboration across the federal government to enhance the US's preparedness for space weather, the environmental changes caused in space by the constant outflow of solar wind from the sun. Like all good scouts know, you can never be too prepared, and that definitely applies to space operations. The United Launch Alliance held a wet dress rehearsal at Cape Canaveral this weekend ahead of their planned December the 24th launch. Cryogenic propellant loading operations took place on both the Vulcan booster stage and the Centaur 5 upper stage to simulate a launch day and test the rocket and pad systems. All looks on track for their Christmas Eve mission. As for the other mission that we've been anxiously awaiting this month, the launch of the X-37B spaceplane, we're still hoping at the time of this recording that we will see it lift off on the Falcon Heavy this evening from Florida. If you were on the East Coast yesterday, then you know that weather forecasts were not favourable for launch, but it's looking like a 70% chance that today will happen. The liftoff window is a narrow 10 minutes, which opens at 8:14 Eastern Time this evening. And if you haven't heard enough from today's headlines, you'll find links to further information on all the stories that I've mentioned in today's show notes. And you'll find them as well at space.n2k.com. I've even added a few opinion pieces for you, one on why we shouldn't trash the space station, another which links to a draft charter for a circular economy proposed by Mohiba Jah, and the last piece is on why 2024 will be an epic year in spaceflight. I, for one, can't wait. Hey T-Minus crew, every Monday we produce a written intelligence roundup. It's called Signals in Space. If you happen to miss any T-Minus episodes, this strategic intelligence product will get you up to speed in the fastest way possible. It's all signal, no noise. You can sign up for Signals in Space in our show notes or at space.n2k.com.
And now a word from our sponsor, 6 Sense. 6 Sense provides award-winning cloud-based automated endpoint and vulnerability management solutions to streamline IT and security operations. With its advanced platform, businesses gain complete visibility and control over their infrastructure, reducing IT and security risks and optimizing operational efficiency. With 6 Sense, you'll get real-time alerts, risk-based vulnerability prioritization and remediations, and an intuitive automation and orchestration engine so you can focus on your core business goals, confident in the knowledge that your enterprise is secure, compliant, and running smoothly. Visit 6sense.com to learn why enterprises choose them.
Now, poor Maria is out with man flu today, courtesy of her dear husband, but she recorded today's guest for us. I'll let Anastasia Prosina explain what she does as the CEO of Stellar Amenities.
My name is Anastasia Prosina. I am founder and CEO of Stellar Amenities. We are developing a space health solution for astronauts, and specifically we are focusing on improving autonomous decision-making of astronauts. And in a nutshell, we're trying to minimize the reliance on mission control so they can make their decisions faster without too much communications. Especially, it's important when we are talking about the Moon and Mars missions. That's where it's going to be super critical. But it's also really useful in low Earth orbit operations where you don't want to ask always where's that to, how do I solve this problem? And so the way we do it is that we access data from the past missions and the environmental data of the spacecraft to drive insights in real time.
So let's talk a little bit about how you're going to do all this and where you got the ideas for that. It's fascinating. I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, thank you. I studied urban planning as an undergrad, and then I got into aerospace architecture, specifically designing space habitation. I worked in Houston with astronauts and NASA's specialists, NASA GSC specialists. So while I was getting masters in space architecture, I realized that we talk about launching rockets to space. We talk about humanity in space. We talk about like all this infrastructure, like the bricks we need for sustainable future of humanity in space. Yet there's not so much of attention paid towards how humanity ourselves, like how we gonna live there sustainably, meaning like how we make sure that we don't get sick, how we make sure that our bone, like we don't lose that much of a bone loss, bone, so we stay healthy. And I noticed that like while NASA is doing an amazing job addressing like developing guidelines, developing like the research on that, there were no really commercial partners or companies really working on that. And I was questioning why. So I was like, once I graduated with my master's, I wanted to find a job that I can work specifically on like space health problems in commercial settings. Yet I couldn't really find anything. And it was 2019, so it was almost like 3.5 years ago. And I decided that I since I was a designer first, I thought that aesthetics and performance of spacecraft is always performance of astronauts. It's geared towards how well the interior design of spacecraft is done. And so that's where Anastasia Stellar Amenities, I first started as a service provider to airspace companies, space habitat providers, to outfit their spacecraft with like hardware products such as, sleep garments, such as galley and everything. But then the last 10 months, I pivoted to more of a software solution because we realized that my co-founder and I, we realized that we need to have more of like holistic view in terms of like, okay, it's not just the hardware that we need to develop, but first we believe that we have to develop the backbone that supports human performance in space.
Yeah, so I was looking at, you mentioned earlier, and I was looking at your website also, it sounds like AI comes into play here, which, yeah, it's a buzzword, blah, 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 but it also does really cool things. So, because you alluded to some of that as well in terms of that performance optimization, which, for an astronaut who is so busy, every minute is allocated. That makes a big difference. So tell me your thoughts on that.
I feel like astronauts are the ultimate knowledge workers. We were really surprised that with the ChatGPT, by the way, went online a year ago. I think that's when the humanity has changed a lot. It's been a year. We've been having AI accessible to everybody, pretty much. And I feel like astronauts probably the people that mostly like they need AI the most. And AI meaning not AI that's something that is making decisions on their own, as an assistant that like uses the data of the past mission, so it doesn't come up with their own like ideas how to rule the world or like how to operate the spacecraft. It's like really, it's a data-driven approach. It's almost like if astronaut had the access of data to access to other astronauts' brain, it's pretty much what we're creating now is the network of astronauts' brain because they have this really unique knowledge.
The way you put that is really cool.
Putting into something that is accessible by astronauts, both space mission planners and mission control. Yeah, I think it's super valuable, especially as we're talking about the astronaut hour costing $130,000. It's a lot of money.
It sure is. Yeah. So, and you mentioned also the being able to make, I don't know if I'm phrasing this correctly, but autonomous decisions especially when there's a huge time delay or not able to access mission control, maybe because they are physically unable to contact them at that time. That is a huge change from what we often think of as being as tethered to a mission control on Earth. The potential there is fascinating, honestly.
Yeah, I just can see that how this tool, it's almost like the way I think about it is that we talk about humanity becoming multiplying interspecies. But the true notion of becoming multiplying interspecies, meaning that we can live separately from Earth. And of course, we need to have suppliers, but eventually, we will be able to derive everything from in situ, like everything that is local. And then for astronauts to be able to operate efficiently, and not just astronauts is our first users. Like the next users will be anybody who's going to space, and it will be taking longer than astronauts to use our product. But still, if you think about like 10, 20, 30-year timeline. That's where I see like every citizen that will be living in space will be using our platform. But yeah, you will not be able to, because space, like airspace industry, is such a specialized knowledge, and spacecraft is such a complicated machine. I believe that the first missions to Mars will be made up of minimal number of people, be honest. It's not going to be many people, and especially like even 10 years, I don't believe there's going to be huge colonization. There's going to be only a handful of astronauts that have really specialized knowledge. But it's going to, I believe we do have limitation of how much we can know. And then we do have to tap into, the books, the readings and stuff. And normally astronauts do it. They go into handbooks and read it. But it takes a while, and so what we try to do, we're providing semantic search through the documentation. So instead of just searching for specific knowledge in a specific chapter, then you can ask a question, and then it will search the answer throughout the system.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's semantic search is just fantastic in what it's opening up. I can imagine in a situation where you are very far and unable to contact anyone else, you need that assistance very quickly too. Where are you with this right now? Like, how is it going?
I got a really best co-founder in-house. We met just 3 months ago, but we've been working closely on the product itself. We went through Starburst Accelerator before. We went through a few programs. But basically, the biggest acceleration that we've gotten so far is really getting to customers and talking about their needs, like developing actually the features that they want. Unfortunately, I can't disclose customers at this point, and we're still so early, and we're still in stealth mode. We're still, doing user interviews. We're still trying to figure out what's the minimal viable product, the shape of it, although we already have like a few iterations of that. But we also, so airspace, like obviously AI is such a huge topic, and there's many problems, including safety and privacy. And we do want to make sure that it's all properly addressed. And one of the biggest problems in the aerospace industry, by the way, in terms of like developing a software solution that uses data, is that data is in different, they're in different data sets that might not be accessible. And like, say SpaceX launching their own astronauts, and then they gather data, and most of it is not shared, say, with the public, and then it's shared with NASA. And then it's almost like my biggest job is just really figure out like all this network of relationships, like how do you make sure that you actually integrate your product within those intricate networks between relationships of companies and vendors and everything. Yeah.
I read stories all the time from various reporters in the space beat about how data sharing is such an issue between agencies and private companies. And I often wonder about what that's going to mean, especially as we advance forward when we need that information shared. But again, also things need to be secure and private, of course. So not a small problem. That is genuinely like a really difficult one, but it's a very fascinating one too.
Maria, thank you so much. It was a wonderful experience. For everybody who's listening, I wish you really the stellar time of your life. Probably my biggest advice, if I can give an unsolicited advice, is to, wherever you have in your mind, go ahead and pursue it. I had no idea I would work on something like that. And I grew up in Siberia really with no resources. Like looking at my own experience, I think I just had a clear goal what I wanted to do, and I just pursued it, and I had a lot of rejections. And it's still, I'm not saying it's easy now to develop something of what we're developing, but if you truly believe in something, I think that there's no reason to not develop something that you really want to develop.
We'll be right back.
Now, a word from our sponsor, the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute, currently seeking qualified applicants for its innovative Master of Science in Security Informatics degree program. study alongside world-class interdisciplinary experts, and gain unparalleled educational, research, and professional experience in information security and assurance. Interested U.S. citizens should consider the National Science Foundation's CyberCorps Scholarship for Service program, which covers tuition and a $6,000 annual professional development allowance, as well as providing a $37,000 additional annual stipend. Apply for the scholarship and the fall semester by March 1st. Learn more at cs.jhu.edu/MSSI.
Welcome back. Okay, I was always perplexed by the notion of sound as a kid and was enthralled by the question, if a tree falls in a forest and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? Of course, we all know that sound will travel if there's an atmosphere to carry it, so the answer is yes. But this next one definitely had me head scratching as an adult. If space junk collides with other space junk in orbit, can it be heard? And if so, can we hear it on Earth? Now, we covered the story last week of the University of Michigan researchers presenting their study on small, or micro even, pieces of space junk. The clever team found that the electrical burst created at the point of collision can be detected by Earth-based radio telescopes. So guess what? They do make sound, and it can be heard right here on Earth. Now, there's approximately 35,000 pieces of space debris larger than 4 inches or 10 centimeters floating around in low Earth orbit, according to the European Space Agency. So it's important to keep track of these things. If you look at space junk that measures smaller than 4 inches, the debris numbers into the millions hurtling around the Earth at speeds that can approach 20,000 miles per hour and threaten operational satellites. So now we know that they make a sound. You know what's going to be added to the list of crazy noises that we think we hear at night? Was that a creaky floorboard that just disturbed my sleep? Or the distant sound of space junk colliding? That's it for T-Minus for December the 11th, 2023. For additional resources from today's report, check out our show notes at space.n2k.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. You can email us at space@n2k.com or submit the survey in the show notes. Your feedback ensures we deliver the information that keeps you a step ahead in the rapidly changing space industry. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like ours, T-Minus, are part of the daily routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K's strategic workforce intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. Learn more at n2k.com. This episode was mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music and sound design by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jen Iben, our VP is Brandon Karff, and I'm Alice Carruth. Thanks for listening.